I give thanks for so many young voices. What a wonderful space to be able to hear prayers from young voices and scripture read from young voices. I give thanks for that. Let's move a bit, people. I need to move. So I encourage you just to shake a bit in your seat. Maybe I'm a campus pastor. I move. I work with college people. So just roll your shoulders. I don't know, shake your arms. You can stand even, God forbid. You can do some of that. We've been sitting in our seats for a while. I love a good shoulder roll here where we just sort of put our heads down. I think you're thinking she's crazy. Go with me. And we're just going to roll our shoulders up really slowly. I just want to just feel that in our bodies. This has nothing to do with the sermon, everything to do with self-care. So great. Just roll them all the way down. Yeah, love that. Okay, good. Sometimes I feel like we get in our pews and then we don't move for an hour and then we leave with sciatica. So if that's you, don't do that to yourself. I wouldn't love that. We moved a little. I ask that you, in your space, sort of ground your feet to the ground. I want you to place your feet squarely on where you're sitting. I love that. And you can even, if you want to, you can put your hands down facing towards the earth if you need. Maybe you like them up. Either way, let's just be in a posture of mindfulness. And I want you to imagine through the bottoms of your feet. Perhaps you close your eyes. Perhaps you gaze downward. You can sort of feel the roots beneath you. Imagining sort of deep down beneath this building, the ground that is holding us. What does that feel like? Just take a minute with that feeling on your feet. I like to imagine sort of the earth holding me as I am noticing it, that we're sharing sort of energy in this space. Feel free to return to this moment, perhaps blink your eyes, perhaps move your bodies again. Victoria Lortz, an ecological theologian, believes the church has a wilderness problem. In other words, Christians have grown too disconnected from the grounds upon which we stand. And this has had dire consequences for our faith communities and for our planet. One of the major things that we think about at ECM that I will bring to you today is how we connect and are in this mutual relationship with the world around us. I loved the image of pumpkins, because pumpkins give us things, but I want us to think about what we give to the pumpkins. I think so often we see the world through the eyes of Genesis, this space of dominion, and that we are extracting. We are getting things, but what are we giving back? We have a wilderness problem. I notice in this sanctuary, I love this space, by the way. It's great for pictures. If you ever want to do headshots, great idea. I notice that when we look around, I can feel and experience the sunlight, but I can't see the outside of this place. I can't see the trees that are growing in front of this building that I see when I walk by. I am removed, physically and literally, in this space from the natural world. And sometimes that feels good. But I think it also can lead to this wilderness problem, this disconnection that happens in our spaces like this. In Southeast Kansas, where we go as students and sometimes graduates, because it's fun to go on trips, we go and learn about the environment on an organic farm. And on this farm, across the street, is a large plot of land where they're always growing sort of normal rotation crops, as it were. I'm not saying that right, but move with me through it. And in an effort recently to help grow their soybeans better, they sprayed pesticides over this land. And as a result, all of the bees within 2 miles were killed overnight. We have a wilderness problem. The Kansas River, or the Kaw, that runs through Manhattan is polluted with car batteries.
because a local mechanic in the 90s decided that he could bury thousands of batteries in the shores of the Ka over several years without any consequence to his business, because he externalized the cost of doing business to the wild. Those batteries, which were disposed of in Manhattan and are still being collected by Friends of the Ka, you too can get a kayak and help us go get these batteries, can be found as far downstream as Lawrence. The lawn or turf grass that is growing outside on this very lawn is an invasive species propagated by European royalty, sort of think rose gardens of the Queen Elizabeth time, brought to the States by white colonizers, and the trend we know today of lawn caught on like wildfire as a result of the post-World War II GI Bill, a bill which subsidized homes for white soldiers and excluded black military families from purchasing land. The perfect lawn that we have in our minds when we think of what that looks like is the vestment of white colonial empire. We have a wilderness problem. Christians struggle to be in mutual relationship with the wild, even here in Kansas. We are enamored with the supremacy of the human species. And it is propagated by church theologies, like the ones that often are interpreted from Genesis, where we are created to subdue and to have domain over the world. In this passage that we heard so beautifully read from our friend today, humans are uniquely prized and thereby created in God's image, and then given dominion over animals. The plants are then overneath or underneath these animals. And so it falls that human beings still sort of end up at the top of this. Taken out of context, in perhaps a more generous reading of this text, at first glance, this having dominion might be comfortable for us. God, for example, is looking out for the survival of the human species, and there's enough for us to eat, and that's good. Another interpretation that I have encountered is that we are sort of the benevolent monarchs, and we are expected to reign over our charges of the natural world with kindness. Human beings, as the most important, most enlightened, most special, are stewards of the earth. However, I don't know if we do that very well, that stewardship thing. And I don't know if we really haven't chosen dominion to be as a result of a license to take and exploit and conquer, even in our own lawns. Because whether we are stewards or conquerors, we're still at the end of that equation. By seeing ourselves as foremost, we really have forgotten that we really don't live very well without all this other stuff around us. And we also can contribute to that relationship too. It is a relationship that we are called into. Our passage from Revelation today, and people get nervous when I pick Revelation. So if you were feeling nervous, it's okay. We won't go there today, and you know what I mean. This passage from Revelation is often interpreted in evangelical communities to mean that individuals are spat out for lukewarm transgressions. And generally that means something like if you aren't saved, you aren't going to heaven, and then you'll be left behind. You know the story. I offer a different interpretation of this from Revelation. Perhaps instead of spitting out individuals, as often is interpreted, the author of Revelation is referring to the community being questioned because they did not wish to see the new that God waved in their faces over and over and over again. Revelation is often translated as to reveal because it's easy, and I get it. Another way to interpret this word that John Collins offers, who's a fabulous theologian, he was my mentor in school, and anyway, that's what happened in this moment, refers to it as unveiling, an unveiling rather than a revealing. And consequently, these unveilings are not things that just happen one time, like a rapture, but instead they are a process of unveiling a process of unveiling that happens over and over again in community with one another, in community, not just as individuals. And these unveilings happen best when we pay attention to the lives and struggles of one another. They happen best when we pay attention to what's happening in our communities. When we pay attention perhaps to the species which are not of the human variety. I think climate change theologically is the phenomena of an estranged relationship. An estranged relationship between human species and the rest of the planet. We are living in a moment when we have seen unveiling after unveiling after unveiling. I'm sick of those climate reports. I don't know about you. And I'm probably tired of a little bit of sermons on climate change. You probably are too. Thank you for sitting with me through that. We have decades of evidence for these conversations, and there are concrete steps for us to consider. Victoria Lortz is the author of Church of the Wild and offers a different way for faith communities to reestablish or rewild their faith communities and faith practices. In Job, we hear this passage. But ask the animals, and they will teach you. Or speak to the land, and it will inform you. But ask the animals, and they will teach you. In this way, human beings are really the students of the natural world, rather than its master. Doug Tallamy from the University of Delaware writes in Nature's Best Hope that humans can reconcile this part of the equation in our own yards, and shows that by thinking about our yards as a part of a national park project in which folks are replanting native plants in their yards, we can actually have more land by acreage than we have in national parks, just by thinking of our yards in new ways rather than in these perfect lawn ways. The sustainability retreat, which I referenced earlier, is really one of my places of hope. We give students $200 to try an ecological project that feels like meaningful to them. And in that way, we're turning over sort of the power to be in this collective space and collective conversation with students who are studying these things very intentionally. And we actually have a grant with you all called Be the Church, where ECM and students and folks from this congregation are thinking about changing ECM's lawn and turning it into a place that produces food for our neighborhood, but also sustains multiple species, like butterflies or bugs that we may not like but we need, right? Revelation reminds us that we are collectively accountable for the unveilings of our lifetimes. There is much to be done, and there has been so much done. I know many of you in this congregation are involved in this conversation in deep and meaningful ways. And I give thanks for that, because sometimes I wake up and I need a little encouragement, you know what I'm saying? I also encourage this congregation to continue to consider their commitment to wild. I had the privilege of preaching recently at a retreat in Wichita at my home church camp. And if you looked out one window, one side of the church building, of the chapel, you could see a parking lot in all of its glory. And I think I counted about 5 invasive species, some Bradford pear and some of that turf grass. And then on the exact opposite window of this same chapel, you could look out and see where they had replanted natural prairie. And the church was sitting directly in the middle of this space, this parking lot, and this native grass. I cannot imagine a more apt analogy for this moment and this church, or the church in general. Will we stay in a lukewarm space, holding a middleness? Or do we embrace and act on the wisdom of these unveilings?